Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the place where we take stacks of rigorous research and turn them into actionable, crystal clear knowledge just for you. Today, we're peeling back the layers on a molecule that, well, it sits right at the intersection of fundamental biology and some pretty high-end wellness claims. We're talking about glycine.
Glycine is it's deceptively simple. If you look at its structure, it's the single simplest of all the amino acids, just a handful of atoms.
Right.
Yet the claims attached to it are anything but simple. They range from being a secret weapon for sleep to a required fuel for your immune system, all the way to a supposed key to extending human longevity.
Exactly. And the sheer breadth of those claims is precisely why we need to dive deep today. Our mission is laser focused. We're cutting through all the noise using your source material, which is heavy on human clinical trials, systematic reviews, meta-analyses. And we're going to be applying the highest standard of evidence certainty, the GRADE framework, to identify exactly what is a clinical trustworthy fact, what is low certainty hype, and maybe most interestingly, what is strictly dependent on pairing glycine with something else entirely.
That framework, that grade rating, is absolutely critical here. We have to separate correlation from verified causation, and we have to be, completely rigorous in differentiating the single ingredient effects from these powerful but distinct multi-ingredient protocols that often generate the most headlines.
Okay, so let's set the stage then. Glycine is everywhere in the body, which makes sense. It's an amino acid. But for you listening, you might be hearing this for the first time and thinking, why is it constantly popping up as a supplement if our body can make it? If it's non-essential, why would we need to add more?
That is the essential question. You're right. It's technically not essential, meaning the body can make it, primarily in the liver and kidneys.
Yeah.
But, and this is the key, we have compelling research showing that the amount synthesized in vivo, inside your body, is very often insufficient to meet the total metabolic demand.
Wait, insufficient for what? Are we talking about just basic day-to-day maintenance, or are we talking about high-demand situations?
Both, really, but especially high-demand situations. Think about periods of rapid growth or chronic inflammatory states, certain diseases, or just the high-maintenance requirements of complex systems like collagen and glutathione synthesis.
So there's a huge demand.
A huge demand. When we calculate the total metabolic need for glycine, which includes its role as a building block and as a fuel for creating other molecules, it often exceeds the body's ability to produce it. This is why we classify it as conditionally essential.
Conditionally essential. I like that term.
It's an amino acid you need in such large quantities that making it yourself could become a major bottleneck, especially under stress.
So we might be running a deficit without even knowing it, particularly as we age or deal with chronic issues. And that deficit matters because, as you said, it has a massive list of jobs that go way beyond just being a protein component.
Absolutely. Glycine is indispensable. It serves as a precursor for an astonishing array of critical molecules. For structure, for instance, it's indispensable for collagen synthesis.
Right, collagen.
It has to be present at every third position in the collagen triple helix. If you don't have enough glycine, you simply cannot form that strong triple helix structure efficiently.
So if collagen is the scaffold of the body, skin, joints, blood vessels, glycine is like the mandatory repeating rivet that holds the whole structure together.
That's a perfect analogy. Precisely. And beyond structure, it's essential for creatine production, which is crucial for muscle energy. It's needed for purines.
DNA and RNA building blocks.
Exactly. And Heme, part of hemoglobin. And perhaps the most celebrated role, certainly in the context of health span, is its role in synthesizing glutathione.
Glutathione, which everyone calls the body's master antioxidant. So explain that connection. Why is glycine considered rate limiting here?
Glutathione, or GSH, is a tripeptide. It's made of 3 amino acids: glutamate, cysteine, and glycine. Of those 3, studies consistently show that glycine and cysteine are the ones most likely to be deficient, especially in older adults or people facing high oxidative stress.
So if you're low on glycine, the whole factory just slows down.
The factory slows down, it's a necessary ingredient, and if you don't supply enough, the production of the master antioxidant GSH is inevitably going to be challenged. And this has massive implications for managing inflammation and oxidative damage, which, as we know, are 2 central drivers of aging.
That sets the stage beautifully. Before we get into the heavy-hitting benefits, let's talk logistics, the pharmacokinetics. If you decide to start supplementing, how fast does it work? And maybe more importantly, how safe is it?
Right. The timeline of absorption is key. Oral glycine is highly water-soluble. This means it doesn't need fat or complex digestion. It's absorbed remarkably fast in the small intestine through active transport.
How fast are we talking?
Human pharmacokinetic studies, the PK studies, are very clear on this. Peak plasma levels are reached quickly, typically within about 30 to 60 minutes after you take it.
30 to 60 minutes. That rapid uptake is a massive piece of data, isn't it? Because that tells us exactly when we should be taking it for short-term effects, like sleep. If it took 3 hours to work, the whole timing would be different.
Exactly. The rapid absorption dictates the application. If you want a physiological effect that relies on a plasma spike-like initiating the sleep mechanisms we'll get to, you need that fast uptake. It bypasses slow, gradual processes and delivers a signal quickly.
Now, what about accessing the brain? Because some of the benefits we're going to talk about, particularly in mental health and sleep, are clearly neurological. Can something we swallow actually cross the blood-brain barrier effectively?
That's a more nuanced picture. If you take a single dose, peripheral glycine does cross the blood-brain barrier, but it's a slow process.
Okay.
However, the studies using sustained high-dose regimens, we're talking therapeutic protocols that last for weeks, not just a day or two, have confirmed that oral glycine does successfully increase overall brain glycine levels.
And they can measure that?
They can. They measure this using advanced imaging like proton magnetic resonance spectroscopy, or HMRS, in human subjects.
Yeah.
So yes, if you sustain the dose, it absolutely links up with effects in the central nervous system.
Good to know it can reach the target. Now let's talk safety. This is a major concern when we discuss high-dose amino acids, especially for chronic use.
Glycine has an exceptionally high safety profile across human trials, even when researchers are using remarkably high therapeutic doses. And we mean massive doses, as we'll see later.
So for the more common doses?
For common doses, general tolerability is excellent. Things like a single 3-gram dose for sleep, or chronic regimens like 5 grams taken 3 times a day, so 15 grams total. Those are very well tolerated.
That's reassuring. But what are the limits? What are the typical side effects when they do happen?
At those common doses, adverse events are usually minimal. When they do occur, it's generally mild, transient GI upset.
So like an upset stomach.
Exactly. We're talking about things like mild nausea, a bit of abdominal discomfort, or soft stools. And critically, these effects are almost exclusively associated with very high single bolus doses, the kind of specialized clinical doses where someone is taking 30 or 40 grams all at once. For most people listening, the risk of serious side effects is exceedingly low.
Okay, with that foundation laid, let's talk evidence quality. We're using the GRADE framework, that system that tells us exactly how confident we should be in a specific claim. This is where we separate the internet promises from clinical reality.
Right, so we've synthesized a number of meta-analyses and systematic reviews, and there are 3 areas where the human data is sufficiently consistent, robust, and often replicated to warrant a moderate to high certainty rating. These are the areas where you can act with confidence.
Give us the top 3. What's distinct about each one?
First, sleep quality. The evidence for a small, targeted 3-gram dose improving subjective sleep satisfaction and next-day function is robust. It's consistently rated moderate certainty. This is the simplest, most actionable win.
Okay, simple and actionable. What's number 2?
Second, it's used as an adjunctive therapy for schizophrenia. Now, this is highly specialized, involves massive daily doses.
A completely different world.
A completely different world. But multiple RCTs support its benefits for what are called negative symptoms, earning it a moderate rating.
And the third?
And third, the GlyNAC combination effects in aging. Now, this is a combination intervention, not glycine alone, but the rigorous RCT data showing the reversal of multiple aging hallmarks in older adults is high certainty for that specific 2-part protocol in that specific population.
So we have a clear, actionable win with sleep, a specialized clinical application for schizophrenia, and this combination powerhouse, GlyNAC, targeting deep biology. Now let's look at the flip side. Where is the evidence a low W or very low certainty? This is usually where the biggest hype lives.
It is. The areas where the evidence is sparse or indirect or just non-existent in humans are often the most attractive claims.
Such as?
Firstly, longevity and lifespan extension in healthy humans.
Yeah.
You have to be brutally honest here. There are no randomized human trials that show glycine alone increases lifespan.
None.
0. All the data generating those splashy headlines, the 6% extension in mice, the 33% in worms, that is strictly non-human evidence. The leap from a worm's metabolic fate to a human's 80-year health journey is enormous.
That distinction needs to be hammered home. If you are taking glycine just to add 5 healthy years to your life, you are operating on animal data and inference, not hard human evidence. What about for, say, the gym? physical performance, body composition.
For isolated muscle, joint, and cartilage effects in healthy training populations, the evidence for pure glycine is low to very low. Any positive signals regarding joint health or skin elasticity, they typically come from trials using collagen peptides.
Which are rich in glycine, but it's not the only thing in there.
Exactly. Collagen also contained other bioactive peptides and amino acids. You cannot attribute the benefits solely to the glycine. The few positive results for pure glycine on muscle mass are in very specific diseased populations, like malnourished dialysis patients. We can't generalize that to a healthy gym goer.
That clarity is exactly what we need. Let's start the deep dive into that first, most robust, and easiest win: better sleep. This is the section for you, the listener, if you're looking for an evidence-backed intervention that is low risk, easy to implement, and relatively fast-acting. Let's establish the specifics. What did the most robust trials define as the Goldilocks dose?
The most robust evidence, that moderate certainty evidence, points to a very precise regimen. 3 grams of oral glycine taken as a single dose, approximately 30 to 60 minutes before you want to fall asleep.
3 grams.
Just 3 grams. This dose range consistently delivered benefits in small but importantly well-designed randomized crossover trials.
I want to focus on that 30 to 60-minute window. That aligns perfectly with the pharmacokinetics we just discussed, right? You're timing it so that peak plasma levels hit just as you're trying to fall asleep.
Precisely. It's an intervention based on the molecular timetable. You need that rapid absorption we talked about to ensure the signal reaches the bloodstream and the brain in time to assist the natural process of falling asleep.
And what were the results? I mean, we often hear people say they slept better, but what did the trials actually measure?
Well, subjective reporting was overwhelmingly positive. Volunteers with mild sleep complaints, people who struggle to fall asleep or wake up feeling tired, they reported significantly improved subjective sleep quality and greater sleep satisfaction.
Okay, so they felt better.
They felt better.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting. They also reported significantly reduced daytime sleepiness and fatigue, and measurably improved performance and alertness the following day. And this was even maintained in studies where healthy subjects were intentionally partially sleep restricted.
The idea that you feel less sleepy the next day without a traditional sedative is a massive selling point. A sleeping pill can knock you out, but it often leaves you with that mental hangover.
That's the key differentiator. Glycine does not operate like a GABAergic sedative, which actively suppresses your nervous system. The objective studies, which used polysomnography or PSG,
The gold standard for sleep studies.
the gold standard, they supported this, showing a crucial effect: a shorter sleep onset latency. That means the subjects fell asleep faster. It promotes natural, higher quality sleep architecture rather than forcing the body into a drugged state. It's more of a gentle biological assist.
And from a practical standpoint, the sources noted you didn't strictly need pure glycine powder for this effect.
Correct. The core effects were established using free glycine powder, but later trials confirmed that if you take collagen peptide supplements that deliver an equivalent amount of glycine, around 3 to 3.5 grams about an hour before bed, you can see similar sleep benefits.
So it's really the glycine molecule doing the work.
It seems to be. It reinforces that it's the specific molecule, glycine, reaching a certain plasma concentration, that is the therapeutic agent, regardless of its source.
Now let's get to the mechanics, because this is often where people are genuinely surprised. When you think of a sleep aid, you think of something that calms the mind. Glycine does that, but its primary and strongest mechanism is actually physical.
Yes. The first and most robustly supported mechanism relates directly to thermoregulation. To initiate quality sleep, your core body temperature must drop slightly. If you've ever noticed feeling a little chilly before drifting off, that's your body preparing for sleep. Glycine acts as a cue for this process.
How does swallowing an amino acid make your core temperature drop?
Human studies measured this directly. Oral glycine induces peripheral vasodilation.
Widening the blood vessels.
Right? It widens the blood vessels, particularly in your hands and feet. When blood flow increases to the surface of the skin, your body can more efficiently radiate heat outward. This facilitated heat loss causes a modest but significant lowering of your core body temperature. And that decrease is a highly favorable signal for sleep onset.
So it's not knocking you out with a chemical, it's optimizing the biological conditions for sleep by essentially opening up the radiators in your hands and feet. That's a fundamentally different approach.
It is, and it explains why you don't get the hangover effect. It's helping your body execute a necessary pre-sleep routine. The second mechanism involves central nervous system modulation.
Okay.
Glycine is known to act as an inhibitory neurotransmitter in the spinal cord and brainstem.
Inhibition, meaning it pumps the brakes.
Precisely. It pumps the brakes, but in a very specific location relevant to sleep. More specifically, it modulates NMDA receptors in the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN.
The SCN, that's the master clock in the brain, right?
The master clock. It orchestrates your entire circadian rhythm, your sleep-wake cycles. By modulating NMDA receptors at this critical juncture, glycine influences the timing and quality of sleep initiation, aligning your internal clock with that physical signal to cool down.
That dual action is powerful. You're giving your brain a subtle inhibitory signal at the master clock, and you're pairing it with a physical signal to cool the core. It's a tag team approach that explains why 3 grams, timed correctly, is so effective.
Exactly. It's optimizing 2 fundamental non-sedating paths to rest. And that precise dose and timing 3 grams, 30 to 60 minutes before bed, is the highest certainty, lowest risk application we can recommend based on the current evidence.
We are now moving from general wellness and that gentle 3-gram dose to highly specialized clinical territory. The data on glycine as an adjunctive therapy in severe mental health conditions, particularly schizophrenia, is robust, but the application is radically different. We cannot stress this enough. This section describes a treatment protocol requiring specialist medical oversight, not self-supplementation.
That caution is paramount. We are about to discuss doses that dwarf the 3 grams for sleep by a factor of 20. The evidence here is rooted deep in the complex pathophysiology of schizophrenia.
So lay out the context for us. Why would an amino acid be relevant to a condition as complex as schizophrenia?
The prevailing theory in this context suggests that schizophrenia is linked to NMDA receptor hypofunction, meaning these crucial glutamate receptors, which are vital for learning and memory, aren't signaling correctly. They're underactive.
Okay.
And glycine, as we mentioned, acts as an obligatory coagonist at that receptor.
So if the receptor is struggling to fire correctly, introducing a flood of glycine is like turning up the fuel supply to help it function more normally.
That is the hypothesis, yes.
Yeah.
The idea is that supplementing with massive doses of glycine could prime or improve that compromised NMDA signaling and thereby potentially ameliorate some of the debilitating symptoms.
So what does the human evidence, the moderate certainty evidence, actually show?
The evidence is compelling, but for a specific subset of symptoms. Multiple randomized controlled trials and meta-analyses consistently show that high-dose adjunctive glycine, meaning it's added on top of standard antipsychotic medication, significantly reduces what are called negative symptoms.
Can you define those negative symptoms for us? They are often less understood than the positive ones.
Sure, positive symptoms are things like hallucinations or delusions, the added behaviors. Negative symptoms are the opposite. They're characterized by a deficit in normal functions.
So things are missing.
Things are missing. We are talking about crippling issues like apathy, emotional flattening, social withdrawal, anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure, and difficulty initiating speech or activity. These symptoms are often the most resistant to standard antipsychotics. And the trials report significant reductions in these negative symptoms, sometimes by as much as 30 to 36%.
That is a staggering improvement in an area of psychiatry that desperately needs better tools. But let's be realistic about the dose required to achieve this.
It is a shocking difference. We are talking about doses far exceeding anything we've discussed. The typical regimen in these clinical trials is often 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day.
0.8 grams per kilogram. So for a 70-kilogram person, an average adult.
That equates to roughly 56 to 60 grams of pure glycine daily. This is usually given in multiple divided doses and sustained over many weeks.
60 grams, that's 20 times the amount used for sleep. That is clearly a pharmaceutical-level intervention.
It absolutely is, and that's why the oversight is non-negotiable. While these high doses have been surprisingly well tolerated in clinical settings, mostly just reporting that mild GI upset, this application is strictly clinical or investigational.
The sources highlight a specific drug warning that is crucial for anyone on antipsychotic medication to understand, particularly involving the drug clozapine.
Yes, the clozapine warning is paramount. Meta-analyses have consistently found that when high-dose glycine was combined with the atypical antipsychotic clozapine, it often did not help, and in some cases may have worsened positive symptoms.
Worsened them.
Or just reduce the overall therapeutic benefit. This requires careful monitoring and strongly advises against combining the two without direct specialist consultation. It suggests the mechanisms might conflict in a detrimental way.
And beyond that specific drug, what about the general safety of chronically ingesting that much amino acid?
Well, as I said, it's surprisingly tolerable, but these extremely high daily doses have, in some studies of healthy volunteers, occasionally produced transient negative effects on sensorober gating and cognitive performance.
So it can be too much for a healthy person.
It underscores that fundamental principle. Dose determines function. What works as a therapeutic in a disease state may be too much for a healthy system.
The takeaway is clear. Glycine has powerful, evidence-based neurological effects, but they are incredibly dose-dependent. And outside of that small, simple dose for sleep, they demand professional clinical context and monitoring. Let's transition now from the massive therapeutic dose to a chronic, moderate dose that has been tested for systemic health benefits. We're moving to metabolic health, an area where the evidence is maybe preliminary but shows genuine promise, particularly for conditions associated with chronic inflammation.
Yes, and this is where that conditionally essential nature of glycine really shines through, because it appears that the glycine demands in conditions like metabolic syndrome or type 2 diabetes are so high that supplementation starts to correct underlying deficits.
So what were the successful dosing and duration parameters used in the trials that showed positive results for, say, glycemic control?
The key chronic regimen used in the most successful, though often small trials, involved a total of 15 grams per day.
15. So that's 5 times the sleep dose.
5 times the sleep dose. This was typically divided into 5 grams, taken 3 times daily, usually with meals. And for these chronic benefits to be seen, this regimen was sustained for a minimum of 3 months, with some trials going out to 6 months. It suggests you need a saturation period.
And what were the measured results after that chronic supplementation period in patients with type 2 diabetes?
The chronic effect was modest, but clinically significant. Researchers saw a lowering of glycosylated hemoglobin, or HbA1c.
Which is that long-term measure of blood sugar control.
Exactly, reflects your average blood sugar over the previous 2 to 3 months. In addition, there were reductions in markers of insulin resistance, specifically HOMA-IR, and a decrease in fasting insulin levels.
That speaks to long-term control. But you also mentioned a quicker effect, a kind of immediate response to a meal.
That's right. Acute challenge studies involve subjects taking a single dose of glycine alongside a sugary drink or meal. The results show that glycine successfully reduced the postprandial glucose excursion.
Meaning it blunted that big sugar spike after eating.
Exactly. The sharp detrimental spike was blunted, and it modestly increased insulin secretion from the pancreas.
That's a powerful twin action. Let's unpack the mechanism. What's driving this?
There are 2 main mechanisms. First, and this is a big one, is reducing chronic inflammation. Clinical studies in these patients found that the 15 gram per day regimen significantly lowered circulating levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines, specifically TNF-alpha and IL-6.
And why is reducing those two so important for insulin resistance?
Chronic inflammation, driven by markers like those, is a key driver of insulin resistance. It essentially throws sand in the gears of the insulin receptor. By reducing the systemic inflammation, glycine may be removing a major obstacle to insulin working effectively. The second mechanism is that glycine appears to directly stimulate insulin secretion from the pancreatic beta cells.
So it's both improving the signal and helping the body respond to it.
Precisely. It acts as a signaling molecule to the pancreas.
So we're dealing with a broad anti-inflammatory and metabolic correction mechanism here. Did this benefit extend beyond just glucose? What about cardiovascular markers like blood pressure?
They absolutely did. The same chronic 15 grams per day regimen showed significant reductions in systolic blood pressure, SBP, in patients with metabolic syndrome. We're talking about a mean decrease of around 6 millimol Hg in some studies.
A 6 millimol Hg drop in systolic blood pressure is a significant clinical improvement. That's associated with a reduced risk of major cardiovascular events.
It is, and this aligns with broader population-level observational data. Multiple reviews confirm a very consistent finding. Higher circulating plasma glycine levels are inversely associated with a lower risk of developing metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and coronary heart disease.
But as always, we have to maintain our rigor. That observational link is powerful, but it doesn't automatically mean supplementation is the answer, right?
Precisely. Causality is not firmly established by observational data alone. Mendelian randomization studies, which are powerful genetic tools to test for true causation, they suggest that while glycine levels are definitely correlated, they might primarily be a protective marker of good health, rather than the single primary causal mediator we can just supplement our way out of.
So the high glycine might be a sign of a healthy system, not the direct cause of it.
It could be. The supplementation trials are promising. but the observational data is more complex than a simple low glycine equals supplement fix.
Final crucial caution point for this section. If a listener is already managing T2DM with medication, what is the critical advice regarding that insulin-stimulating effect?
This is vital. If you have diabetes and are on medication, especially insulin secretagogues, which boost insulin release or insulin itself, you must monitor your glucose closely and consult a clinician before starting a high-dose 15-gram per day regimen.
Why is that so important?
Because glycine stimulates insulin secretion, there is a legitimate hypothetical risk of an additive hypoglycemic effect. Your blood sugar could potentially drop too low. We don't have large human drug interaction trials to map this risk, so clinical caution is absolutely paramount.
Okay, this is the final frontier and where the most dramatic claims are made. We're talking longevity and true health span extension. We need to be absolutely definitive, separating the excitement from the hard human data.
Let's start by pulling the hype curtain back first. The key takeaway from the entire body of evidence must be this. There is a profound, undeniable gap between animal studies and human clinical fact.
Okay.
We can state clearly and unequivocally, no randomized human trial demonstrates that glycine alone increases lifespan or longevity endpoints, period.
So all the promising lifespan data, the 6% extension in rodents, the impressive 33% in worms?
Strictly non-human evidence. They are fascinating to researchers as they show the potential of the molecule, but they are not applicable to the human body today. In the human context, benefits have to be inferred indirectly by looking at improvements in recognized aging biomarkers, things like oxidative stress, mitochondrial function, and chronic inflammation.
This is where the story pivots dramatically, because while glycine alone may not have the human longevity data, when you combine it with another key molecule, the evidence shifts from theoretical to groundbreaking clinical reality. And that combination is GlyNAC.
GlyNAC is not just another supplement blend. It is a highly strategic, targeted intervention that has delivered some of the most compelling data in recent aging research. It's a specific combination of glycine plus N-acetylcysteine, or NAC.
So the power comes from addressing that bottleneck we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It's designed specifically to correct age-related glutathione deficiency. We know glutathione is made of glutamate, cysteine, and glycine. As we age, synthesis often stalls because of insufficient glycine and cysteine. NSE provides the cysteine, GlyNAC provides both. We call it the power of three because the benefits arise from restoring optimal levels of all three components.
Let's detail the clinical trial design because this is the basis of the high certainty rating.
Yeah.
How was this tested in older adults?
These were highly rigorous, 16-week randomized controlled trials with older adults, typically aged 61 to 80. Critically, they were compared against an isonitrogenous placebo.
What does that mean, isonitrogenous?
Good question. It means the placebo contained a different amino acid, like alanine, to ensure the subject's nitrogen intake was identical, so it controlled for the effect of just consuming more protein in general.
Got it. And the dose?
The dose was high, around 100 milligrams per kilogram per day of each precursor, glycine and N-acetyl. For a 70-kilogram person, that's roughly 7 grams of glycine and 7 to 9 grams of N-acetyl daily.
And what was the immediate, most dramatic biochemical result on their glutathione status?
The results were dramatic. GlyNAC, and not the placebo, restored glutathione synthesis. Muscle GSH concentrations increased by a massive 164%, and red blood cell GSH by 259%. Crucially, these levels were restored to concentrations not significantly different from those in young, healthy adults.
That is essentially a biochemical reversal of a fundamental age-associated deficit. You're restoring the body's primary defense system against damage. Did this translate into less damage?
It did, immediately. They measured plasma markers of oxidative damage. You can think of these as signs of cellular rust, things like TBRs and F2 isoprostanes. These markers decreased by a remarkable 72%. The rust was being cleaned up.
Now let's talk about the energy centers of the cell mitochondria. Aging is often characterized by a slowdown in energy production.
This is one of the most critical findings. The older adults in the trial had significant mitochondrial dysfunction, specifically impaired fatty acid oxidation. They were struggling to burn fat for energy. GlyNAC resulted in a 78% increase in that fat-burning capacity, effectively addressing the energy deficiency.
And how did that translate to things a person would actually notice in their daily life?
Physical function improved significantly. Subjects experienced better endurance, increased gait speed to levels comparable to the young adults, and measurable improvements in upper and lower extremity strength. These are real functional improvements.
The sources mention that GlyNAC successfully impacted multiple hallmarks of aging at the molecular level. This is where the science gets incredibly exciting because it suggests the intervention is tackling root causes, not just symptoms. Can you highlight the most relevant hallmarks that were corrected?
Of course. First, as we discussed, mitochondrial dysfunction, they improved energy production.
Right.
Second, chronic inflammation. GlyNAC significantly reduced pro-inflammatory cytokines like IL-6 and TNF-alpha.
The same ones we saw in the diabetes section.
The very same. Third, genomic damage. They lowered a DNA oxidative damage marker called 8-OHDG, essentially protecting the integrity of the cell's operating manual.
And the last one?
And fourth, cellular senescence. This is the accumulation of zombie cells. They measured this by lowering the expression of the marker P16INK4A. Lowering this suggests the body is better able to clear out these dysfunctional cells.
That is an incredible sweep of biological correction.
It demonstrates that GlyNAC is addressing fundamental underlying processes of aging by correcting a critical age-related nutritional deficit.
But, and this is the essential caveat we must repeat one final time.
Absolutely. The crucial caveat is that these dramatic multi-hallmark effects are entirely due to the combination of glycine and NAC working together. And the benefits are maintenance-dependent. They began to disappear within 12 weeks of stopping supplementation, suggesting that for true health span support, this high-dose intervention needs to be maintained.
We've covered a remarkable spectrum. Now, let's consolidate all the safety and practical takeaways into a clear action plan for you, the listener.
Let's start with the overall safety profile, which, at standard doses, is exceptional.
What's the bottom line on tolerability, even at the high end?
Glycine has an exceptional safety profile. Doses up to 60 grams per day short-term, that massive clinical dose, are generally well tolerated. Remember, the primary side effect is that mild, transient GI upset.
And what about organ function? Where do we advise caution?
Caution is explicitly advised for individuals with severe kidney or liver disease. These organs are key to glycine metabolism and nitrogen balance. High doses of any amino acid should absolutely be avoided without direct medical supervision.
Let's quickly recap the drug interaction warnings just to ensure they stick.
Two primary categories of concern. One, specific antipsychotics, especially clozapine. We re-emphasize the risk of potential loss of efficacy or worsening of symptoms.
And two,
anti-diabetic agents. This includes insulin and insulin secretagogues. Because of that risk of an additive hypoglycemic effect, where blood sugar could drop too low. If you are managing diabetes, this requires constant monitoring under a clinician.
Okay, now for the practical part. Based purely on the high certainty of the human evidence, what are the clear dosing recommendations, structured by goal?
We can structure this into three clear evidence-based plans. First, for sleep quality. This is the highest confidence, moderate grade recommendation.
And that is?
3 grams of oral glycine taken as a single dose, 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime. This is the best supported, lowest risk, easiest regimen to trial.
Second, for metabolic support and inflammation reduction. This is moderate confidence but needs oversight.
Right. This involves a much higher commitment. 15 grams daily, typically divided into 2 or 3 doses with meals for a minimum of 3 months. This has shown benefits for HbA1c and blood pressure, but remember, clinical monitoring is required if you are managing diabetes.
And third, for aging biomarkers and glutathione restoration.
This is the GlyNAC protocol. High confidence, but it's a combination. High-dose glycine plus NAC, typically around 100 millikilog day of each. This must be approached with specialist oversight due to the high dosage and complexity. This benefit cannot be achieved with glycine alone.
What a deep dive. What we've uncovered is that glycine is not a single-purpose molecule. It's highly versatile, but the evidence demands absolute precision regarding dose, timing, and combination.
Indeed. We've mapped the evidence spectrum, from simple low-dose solutions like the 3-gram sleep regimen, all the way to intense, multi-hallmark therapeutic interventions like the GlyNAC combination.
The power of the molecule is undeniable. It's demonstrated by its strong performance in treating symptoms associated with disease and aging. It improves T2DM markers, reduces inflammation, and helps with debilitating psychiatric symptoms.
Yet we are left with that massive and critical evidence gap. The complete absence of data confirming that glycine alone extends lifespan in otherwise healthy humans.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to take away. While we have strong data for glycine's efficacy over 3 to 6 months, the biggest, most critical gap in the literature remains the long-term safety profile and continued efficacy of chronic, moderate to high-dose supplementation.
We need large multi-year RCTs, 5, 10, 20 years in otherwise healthy populations to truly confirm the preventive health effects, the long-term metabolic outcomes, and the overall safety of daily chronic supplementation at that 15-gram level. Mapping that long-term landscape is the next crucial frontier of research for this fascinating simple molecule.
Thank you for joining us for this essential deep dive. We hope this knowledge helped you navigate the complex world of wellness claims with confidence, grounded entirely in high-quality human evidence. Until next time, stay curious.